Imagine a world where the trees could speak, where every secret, every lie, could be revealed by the whisper of the wind. In a hidden valley, a young girl discovers just such a power, one that holds the key to unveiling the truth, but at a cost. In today's story, we journey into the whispering trees, a tale of honesty, redemption, and the courage to face the truths we'd rather keep hidden. Stay tuned, because what begins as a gift soon becomes a lesson in living honestly, no matter the consequences. The Valley of Eldon was a place that felt like it belonged to a forgotten time. Encircled by mountains that loomed like silent guardians, it was a haven for farmers and traders who lived simple lives. The air carried the crisp scent of pine, and the golden rays of the sun often danced on the surface of the valley's single winding river. Eldon was a place of peace, or so it seemed. Beneath the surface of its quiet streets and bustling market, secrets festered like unseen roots beneath the soil. Lila was no stranger to these secrets. At 14, she had grown up hearing the hushed conversations of villagers, their voices lowering whenever she passed by. Her mother often warned her to mind her own business. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing, Lila," she would say, wagging a finger at her. But Lila was not one to heed warnings. On this particular morning, Lila found herself staring out the kitchen window at the forest that bordered the village. The Whispering Wood, they called it. The elders spoke of strange happenings there, of people entering and hearing voices that weren't their own. Lila had always been drawn to it, though she couldn't explain why. After finishing her chores, well, most of them, she grabbed her satchel, stuffed in a loaf of bread and a water flask, and slipped out the back door. Her heart raced with excitement as she crossed the meadow that separated the village from the forest. She didn't look back. The forest welcomed her with open arms. The air grew cooler, the scent of damp earth and moss filling her nose. The towering pines stretched skyward, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. Lila felt a thrill of adventure as she walked deeper, her feet crunching over fallen leaves and twigs. For a while, it was just her and the sounds of the forest, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves. But then, as she ventured further, the world seemed to shift. The air grew still, the birds fell silent, and an eerie calm settled over the forest. Lila paused, her heart thumping in her chest. That was when she saw it. The clearing appeared suddenly, as if the forest had parted just for her. The trees here were unlike any she'd ever seen. They were massive, their trunks wider than any cartwheel in Eldon, their bark shimmering faintly in the sunlight. Their roots twisted and curled around each other, forming intricate patterns on the ground. She stepped into the clearing, her breath catching in her throat. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy she couldn't describe. And then she heard it, a soft whisper, like the rustle of leaves, but distinctly words. Lila. She froze. Her name had been spoken, clear and unmistakable, but there was no one around. Her eyes darted from tree to tree, her ears straining to catch the sound again. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. The whisper came again, but this time it wasn't just her name. It was a voice, a chorus of voices, soft and melodic, as though the forest itself were speaking. She lied to her mother yesterday, the voices said. "What?" Lila whispered, her voice barely audible. She took a step back, her heart pounding. She helped a bird with a broken wing. The voices continued, this time with a gentler tone. Lila's mind raced. How did they know? The bird. It had been months ago, a tiny sparrow she'd nursed back to health. No one else had seen her do it. She took another step forward, her eyes fixed on the nearest tree. Its bark shimmered faintly, almost as if it were alive. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and touched the rough surface. The voices stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if the forest had been holding its breath. Lila pulled her hand back and looked around, expecting something, anything, to happen. But the trees stood still, their whispers gone. Her heart still racing, she stepped away from the clearing. She didn't run. but her steps were quick, her eyes darting around the forest as she retraced her path. When she finally emerged from the trees and saw the familiar fields of Eldon, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She turned back to look at the forest one last time. The clearing was hidden now, swallowed by the dense trees. But the memory of the whispers stayed with her. What was that? She muttered to herself. As she walked back to the village, her mind swirled with questions. How did the trees know her name? How did they know about the sparrow, about the lie? She didn't have answers, but she knew one thing for certain. She had to go back. The faint sound of whispers still echoing in her ears. The morning sun bathed the valley in golden light, but Lila's thoughts were clouded with questions. The events of the previous day haunted her. She could still hear the whispers, soft and knowing, echoing in her mind. She sat at the breakfast table, absently picking at a slice of bread while her mother bustled about. "You're quiet today," her mother observed, glancing at her. "Didn't sleep well?" Lila shook her head, forcing a small smile. "Just tired, that's all." But she wasn't tired. She was restless. She couldn't stop thinking about the grove and the strange, whispering trees. She had to return. The hours dragged on as Lila completed her chores, her mind elsewhere. By midday, she couldn't wait any longer. She packed a small bag with food and water, telling her mother she was going to explore near the river. Her mother barely looked up, too busy kneading dough to question her. Once again, Lila found herself standing at the edge of the whispering wood. This time, the forest felt different, more alive, more aware. She hesitated for a moment before stepping into the shadows of the towering trees. The path to the clearing was etched into her memory. She walked with purpose, her heart pounding with both fear and excitement. As she neared the grove, the air grew heavier, and the faint hum of whispers returned, growing louder with each step. When she reached the clearing, it was just as she remembered, beautiful and strange. The ancient trees stood tall and proud, their bark shimmering faintly in the dappled sunlight. The whispers were louder now, a chorus of voices blending together, yet somehow distinct. Lila took a deep breath and stepped closer to the nearest tree. "I'm here," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The trees seemed to respond immediately. The whispers grew clearer, as if they had been waiting for her. She returned. The voices said in unison. "Yes, I came back," Lila replied. "I need to know, what are you? How do you know so much about me?" There was a pause, and then the voices spoke again. "We are the watchers of truth. We see what others do not. We hear what others hide. We know the secrets of the heart." Lila's eyes widened. "You mean you can see everything? About everyone?" "Yes." The weight of their words sank in. She thought of the villagers, of all the things they whispered about behind closed doors. Did the trees know those secrets too? "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "You asked?" The voices replied simply. Lila sat down on the mossy ground, her mind racing. If the trees could see the truth, then they could answer questions no one else could. Her thoughts turned to her friend Maya, who had been accused of stealing money from the market. Maya had sworn she was innocent, but no one believed her. "Can you tell me about Maya?" Lila asked hesitantly. Did she really steal the money from the market? The whispers shifted, the voices blending into a melodic hum before forming words again. Maya did not steal. The truth lies with the merchant. Lila's heart leapt. The merchant? Which one? "The one with the red scarf," the voices answered. Lila thought of the market and immediately pictured the merchant in question, a man named Harlan who was well respected in the village. It was hard to believe he could be the thief, but the trees had no reason to lie. She stood up, determination flashing in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, bowing slightly to the trees. "I'll fix this." When Lila returned to the village, the marketplace was bustling with activity. Maya stood near the fountain, her face pale and her eyes puffy from crying. The accusation had clearly taken its toll on her. Maya, Lila called, running up to her. Maya looked up, startled. Lila, what are you doing here? I know you didn't take the money, Lila said firmly. I know who did. Maya's eyes widened. You do? But how? Trust me, Lila interrupted. Just wait here. She scanned the market until she spotted Harlan, the merchant with the red scarf, tending to his stall. Lila marched up to him, her heart pounding. Harlan, she said, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. You need to tell the truth. The man frowned, looking up from his wares. What are you talking about? Girl, you know what I mean, Lila pressed. The missing money. It was you, wasn't it? Harlan's face turned red. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof? Lila hesitated. She couldn't exactly tell him the trees had whispered the truth to her, but she stood her ground. I know it was you, she said firmly, and if you don't admit it, I'll find a way to prove it. The other villagers began to gather, murmuring among themselves. Harlan shifted uncomfortably under their scrutiny. Fine, he snapped, throwing up his hands. I took the money. I was desperate. All right? My debts have been piling up, and I didn't know what else to do. The crowd gasped, and Maya let out a small cry of relief. You should have asked for help instead of blaming someone else, Lila said, her voice softer now. Harlan hung his head. You're right. I'm sorry. The villagers murmured their disapproval. But some stepped forward to console Maya, apologizing for doubting her. Lila watched as her friend's face lit up with relief and gratitude. That night, as Lila lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the trees. They had given her the truth and helped her right a wrong. But she also realized the weight of their power. If they know everything, she whispered to herself, what else could they tell me? Her heart quickened at the thought, and she resolved to return to the grove. There was so much more to learn, and she had only just begun. The villagers buzzed about Harlan's confession for days. Some praised Lila for her courage, while others whispered about how she could have known such a thing. Lila tried to shrug off their curiosity, but she couldn't ignore the looks. The truth about the trees was a secret she had to protect. Though the trees had helped her expose Harlan, Lila found herself conflicted. How far could she go with their power? Could she bring justice to the village, or would it make her an outcast? One chilly morning, she returned to the grove. The forest greeted her as if it had been waiting, the air heavy with the hum of whispers. She returns with questions. The trees murmured as she entered the clearing. Yes, Lila said, sitting cross-legged on the mossy ground. The village is full of lies and secrets. Can you help me make things right? The whispers shifted, sounding both amused and cautious. The truth is a sharp blade. Wield it wisely, or it will cut the hand that holds it. I'll be careful, Lila promised, though the weight of their warning lingered in her chest. Can you tell me who else is hiding something? The trees hesitated before responding. The farmer who sells the milk. He waters it down to stretch his profits. Lila frowned. That's not fair to the people who buy it. What else? The healer's remedies are false. She uses powders that heal nothing. Lila's stomach churned. She had always trusted the healer's cures. Was her mother's arthritis medicine just another of the healer's lies? And the teacher, the trees continued, their voices growing softer, has been giving gifts to a few students while neglecting others. Favoritism breeds resentment. Lila nodded grimly, her resolve strengthening. The villagers deserve to know the truth. Over the next few days, Lila confronted each person. She exposed the farmer's watered-down milk, forcing him to stop his dishonest practices. She revealed the healer's false remedies, which led to an uproar among the villagers who demanded real solutions. When she brought the teacher's favoritism to light, parents rallied to ensure fair treatment for all students. At first, many villagers praised Lila for her bravery. They called her a truth-bringer, someone who stood up against dishonesty. But as more secrets came to light, the whispers about Lila grew darker. She thinks she's better than us, some muttered. She's digging into things that aren't her business, others said. Lila felt the shift in their attitudes but brushed it off. She was doing the right thing, or so she thought. The sun dipped low on the horizon as Lila sat by the edge of the forest, staring at the grove in the distance. She could feel the unease creeping in. The villagers no longer looked at her with admiration. Their eyes held suspicion and wariness. Determined to find comfort in the grove, Lila ventured into the forest once more. The trees seemed quieter this time, their whispers faint and hesitant. "You return," they said, their tones somber. "Yes," Lila replied, kneeling by the nearest tree. "Why do you sound different?" "The truth has consequences," the trees said. "You have uncovered much, yet you remain blind to what lies within yourself." Lila frowned. "What do you mean?" There was a long pause before the trees answered. "You have a secret, Lila, one you buried deep. But we know." Lila's breath caught. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I don't have any secrets." The whispers grew louder, overlapping like a storm of voices. The barn, the fire, the family left homeless because of a child's carelessness. You... Lila's heart sank as the memory surfaced. She had been playing with a lantern near the barn when she was younger. It tipped over, setting the hay ablaze. The fire spread quickly, destroying the barn and forcing the family to move. She had never told anyone, letting them believe it was an accident. Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't mean to." "But you lied," the trees said. "You let them suffer while you remained silent." Lila fell to her knees, her chest heaving with guilt. She had used the truth to expose others, but had hidden her own wrongdoings. The weight of her hypocrisy crushed her. "What do I do?" she whispered. "Speak your truth," the trees replied. "Only then will you find peace." The next morning, Lila stood in the village square, her heart pounding. The villagers had gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "I have something to say," Lila began, her voice trembling. "I haven't been honest with you. I've been uncovering everyone else's secrets, but I've hidden my own." The crowd murmured, confusion spreading. "Years ago, I started a fire that burned down the miller's barn," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I was playing with a lantern, and I didn't tell anyone. They lost everything because of me." A heavy silence fell over the square. The Millers, now living on the outskirts of the village, stepped forward. Mrs. Miller's face was pale, her hands trembling. You were just a child," she said softly, though pain lingered in her voice. "I should have told the truth," Lila said. "I'm sorry. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." The villagers exchanged glances, their expressions softening. Slowly, Mrs. Miller stepped forward and placed a hand on Lila's shoulder. "Thank you for telling the truth," she said. "That takes courage." One by one, the villagers came forward, offering words of forgiveness and encouragement. Though it didn't erase her guilt, Lila felt a sense of relief. Over time, Lila became known not for exposing others' secrets, but for encouraging honesty and reconciliation. She helped the village heal, using the lessons she had learned from the whispering trees. The grove became a sacred place, a haven where people went to reflect and seek guidance. And though the trees still whispered, their voices were softer now, carrying not just the weight of truth, but the beauty of forgiveness. The silence that followed Lila's confession was unlike anything she had ever experienced. The weight of her words hung in the air as if the entire village held its breath. Lila stood in the center of the square, her hands trembling and her face flushed. For the first time in years, she had spoken the truth that had haunted her. And now the reaction of her neighbors would determine what came next. Mrs. Miller, her gray hair pulled back in a loose bun, looked at Lila with tear-filled eyes. Her husband stood behind her, his face a mix of surprise and something softer, perhaps understanding. "You were just a child," Mrs. Miller finally said, her voice breaking the silence. "It was an accident. But you're right. You should have told us." "I'm sorry," Lila said, her voice cracking. "I didn't know how to face you. I was scared." Mr. Miller stepped forward, his expression stern but not unkind. "Fear makes us do foolish things, but facing your fear now and telling the truth shows you've grown." The villagers murmured among themselves, their initial shock giving way to understanding. One by one, they began to step forward. "I watered down the milk because I was desperate to feed my family," said the farmer, his voice heavy with guilt. "Lila helped me see I was wrong. If she can admit her mistakes, so can I." The healer spoke next, clutching a small satchel of herbs. "I took shortcuts when I shouldn't have. I'll do better. The truth hurts, but it also heals." The teacher, whose favoritism had caused so much division, nodded solemnly. "We all have things to learn." Lila reminded us of that. As each person spoke, Lila felt a warmth spreading through her chest. She hadn't expected the villagers to respond this way. They were forgiving her, and, in doing so, forgiving themselves. Finally, Mrs. Miller reached out and took Lila's hand. "It's time we let go of the past," she said. "You've taken responsibility, and that's what matters. Let's rebuild what was lost, together." The weeks that followed were transformative for Eldon. Lila worked tirelessly to make amends to the Millers, helping them repair their home and farm. But her actions didn't stop there. She began organizing gatherings where villagers could share their struggles and support one another, fostering a spirit of honesty and compassion that hadn't existed before. The whispering trees remained a secret between Lila and the forest, but she visited the grove often, not to seek out others' secrets but to reflect on her own growth. "You have learned the power of truth," the trees whispered one evening as she sat beneath their shimmering branches. "It's more than power," Lila replied. "It's a gift and a responsibility." The trees swayed gently in agreement, their voices soft and melodic. "The truth is not always easy, but it is always necessary. You have brought light to the shadows of your village. Carry that light with you always." Years passed, and Lila grew into a wise and compassionate woman. The village of Eldon thrived under her guidance, becoming known as a place of integrity and fairness. The whispering trees became a quiet symbol of the lessons Lila had learned, their presence a reminder that truth, though sometimes painful, was the foundation of a better world. And so, the girl who once feared her own secrets became a beacon of honesty, proving that the truth, when embraced, has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. And so, we leave Eldon and its whispering trees with a simple but profound truth. Honesty is more than just telling the truth. It's about living it. Lila's journey teaches us that while the truth may be difficult to face, it has the power to heal wounds, mend relationships, and transform lives. When we embrace honesty, we not only free ourselves from the weight of secrets, but also inspire those around us to live with integrity. In the end, the truth may not always be easy, but it is always worth it. Thank you for joining us for this story. If it resonated with you, share it with someone who might need this gentle reminder today.